Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, the 28th, and this is another Panda Pondering. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all your support. Once again, I'm here to give you news and information that you might be interested in. Now, this applies mostly to Californians, and if you're not in California, I'm sorry, but I happen to live in California, so obviously this news is very important to Californians. Governor Newsom today had just announced the plans for reopening the state, and he gave kind of a step-by-step four-stage process to reopen the state. If you want to see the links to his Twitter account and also to CNN's article on it, check the description below. I have posted those links there. So what are the four stages? Well, let me outline them to you, and then I'll give some comments, during and after as well. So the first stage is where we actually are already. We are in stage one right now, and that's called safety and preparedness. This is like kind of an idea of kind of three or four steps within stage one that he's outlined of what we need to accomplish in order to move on to the next stage. So the four things, starting with staying at home and flattening the curve. Now, my personal thought, you've seen the data. We have a linear curve. It is not parabolic and it's not rising quickly. We've flattened the curve. So that's my opinion. So I think, check, we've done this already. The second thing in phase one is building out testing, personal protection equipment, and hospital capacities. So building out testing capacities, building out personal protection equipment, and hospital capacities. I think we're well on our way in this way. I've heard of many stories. I didn't have time to go back and link or go back to the articles and save them and link them for y'all. But there's a lot of reports about expansion of hospitals, expansion of services. Now we're still lacking. Like, for instance, remember I was telling you the other day about my friend whose parents are both nurses and going to work every day. They don't have a full PPE. They have a mask, and that's it. And so I think there's probably an important need for us to build some of those out, and I think we're not there yet. So I wanted to state that it's like I think we can continue without it. That's my opinion only, because we're already in that space and we flattened the curve, even though that has been the case. However, I think there is call that isn't happening yet. Third thing is making our essential workplaces as safe as possible, and I think that's being worked through right now as well. They're looking at ways that people are really in contact with one another, and being careful of especially with sanitation and all that stuff. So I think that's important, and especially in high contact areas, like I was saying yesterday in the meat packing plant example that I gave. They're in close proximity, and they have to be, and so you have to make some way to make what they do safe. And the fourth thing is preparing a sector by sector guidelines for a safe reopening. Now, this one I don't understand. You've created these four stages. You should have that plan already of these sector by sector guidelines. Now, if what the governor is saying is that these four stages are the sector by sector guidelines, perfect, cool. So I'm looking at all these four things. I'm going, it sounds like we're actually fairly ready to move on to stage two. That's my opinion of how I'm reading this. So let's move on to stage two. What he's saying would need to happen in stage two. And this is what he calls the lower risk workplaces. It's like a gradual reopening of some lower risk workplaces with adaptations. And these include the following areas. So it's like retail, especially places with curbside pickup, manufacturing, offices, in parentheses, when telework is not possible. And finally, more public spaces. He kind of outlines like parks and trails, citing the need for exercise. Okay, so that makes sense to some degree. I think there's a lot of leeway with what comes with all that he means from it. But if we're making workplaces as safe as possible, then it should be safe for most offices to open, even if telework is possible. And if we're opening public spaces for citing the need for exercise, what other places are there that have deeper needs that people have that aren't being met, and could be met if the reason for opening parks and trails is the need for exercise. Then there are other reasons why that would work for other spaces as well. So I think, again, I'd like to see where stage two that being done, and I'd like to see kind of what he means by some of those offices, some of those retail spaces, and all that stuff, because there's a wide variety of what he could mean within that space. The third stage is called higher risk workplaces. So this is a gradual reopening of higher risk environments with adaptations and limits on size of gatherings. So this includes like personal care, like hair salons, nail salons, and gyms. This includes movie theaters, sports and sporting events without live audiences, and in-person religious services. So it's really interesting, this grouping of these four things that he cited. The first one, I get that that's not based on size of gathering. That's based on proximity. When you're in a hair salon or nail salon, you are up close and personal with the person. So it is a protection situation. So I'm going to take that one out and say, I get that. I understand, a lot of people will be upset because, we have what's known as corona hair right now. I'm lucky that I can shave my own head. And as you saw in my Facebook, I've shaved, my wife has shaved with my help, our 3-year-old into a mohawk. It's really cute. It's awesome. But anyways, there's a lot of people who can't. And so their hair is a mess, and they're wanting some of that help. And if we're saying that we're not waiting until stage 3, and when is that going to be? That's going to be difficult. And it's interesting to talk about movie theaters, sports without live audiences, and in-person religious services. I think the key here is limits on size of gatherings. So while they're saying that, I don't know that it's all inclusive, like no in-person religious gatherings or no sports without live audiences. It depends on what size they're at. So, I think there's a difference between, like, for instance, if we take in-person religious services, a mega church. Oh, by the way, here, let me show you my son. This is Titus. Say hi, Titus.
Hi, Titus.
No, I tell you, see his mohawk? It's awesome. I love it. Anyways, like, for instance, there's a difference between in-person religious services that are like a regular church that might be 50 people, 100 people, 200 people big, versus a mega church that's like 10,000, 20,000 big. So I'm sure there's some differences there, but that's stage 3. Stage 4 is called the end of stay-at-home order. It's the reopening of the highest risk parts of our economy, but the caveat is once therapeutics have been developed, and this includes mass gatherings such as concerts, convention centers, and live audience sports. Now, you might be asking, what does therapeutics mean? What is that? So this is the part where we're not sure in terms of therapeutics. What is the method that he's talking about? Does therapeutics mean, for instance, vaccines? Does therapeutics means just antiviral medication? What does that actually mean? And I think that's going to be a big point of contention for this. So here's the thing. Not only do we not know what that means, have you noticed there's no timelines that have been stated? So no one knows exactly when this is going to be. I think it's important that I think first and foremost, it's important that we appreciate that he's actually placed guidelines for everyone to see. I think that gives us a clear idea of what he's looking for. And it gives us a clear idea of, okay, here are the steps that we're going to take. But it doesn't really help us without knowing the dates, or if you can't do dates, that's fine. How we're being assessed during the completion of each stage. What's the metrics that we're using? How are we looking at the amount of percentage of success rate for each and every stage? I think these are all important things to think about. And as I'm pondering, as the thing for you to ponder is this: when someone tells you these things, like the governor or someone in a leadership position, I think it's important, and it's a right but also a duty of ours to ask questions. And the questions that we need to ask are, what does he mean by therapeutics, and what's the timelines, and how do we judge by the metrics? Because if you're reading this, you're not really getting much information yet. So this is more so like a announcement about these guidelines for California, but it also is a method for you to think, hey, how often do we take information for granted, and then we have our own imagining of what that looks like, and when it doesn't happen, we get upset about it. Well, this is prime for that, because there's just enough information to give people hope about certain things, but there's not enough information to know when that hope comes into play. And then when people have expectations of when it comes into play, then all of a sudden they get upset and bitter, and it turns into a sour situation. If I learned anything, it's this: communication is a very powerful tool, and it's a very necessary tool. And so utilize this as an opportunity to get clarity and get that communication set. Not everybody will remember that, and it's not up to them to be the ones to communicate when you don't understand. Part of your responsibility is asking and finding out, so that you yourself could be better equipped to understand it in the ways that you need to understand it. So anyways, thank you once again for tuning in. I hope that these news items and the explanation of these news items and ways of pondering or thinking about them are really helpful to you. I will continue to do them. I may not do them daily anymore, because I'm upping the production and doing all these things, so it's taking some time for me to do them. But I'll try to do them, at least 3 or 4 times a week. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. I hope you continue to do so, and hope you're having a great, safe day.